$50,000 a month is what my son threw away when he tried to sell something he never owned. I never imagined greed could blind someone so completely that they couldn't see even the obvious. Nobody sells what isn't theirs. My name is Walter Newman. I'm 73 years old and retired from Bank of America. I worked for 37 years as a branch manager in Port Aransas, a small, charming coastal town in Texas. Here everyone knows each other. Everyone knows everything about everyone else, both the good and the bad. Unfortunately, today I'm known as the father of the man who sold what wasn't his. It's a shame I carry, even though I'm not to blame. I've always been a man of values, you know. I grew up in a simple but honest family. My father, Mr. Jonathan, was a fisherman and taught me early on that the sweat of honest work is worth more than any ill-gotten fortune. I carried this teaching throughout my life. I saved every cent I could, even when money was tight. I never let my family lack for anything, but we also never had unnecessary luxuries. My wife, Margaret, may God rest her soul, always supported me in this. When Wesley was born in 1980, I swore I would give him all the opportunities I never had. I paid for private school, college, always encouraged his studies. But it seems the values, those that can't be bought, I couldn't pass on properly. Before continuing this story, I'd like to thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for the opportunity to share my story. This is a release I need to make, a lesson that might serve someone. And I ask you who are watching to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. Every day there's a new story here, real stories like mine that can teach something valuable. But getting back to the subject, that Friday phone call changed everything. When I answered the phone, I could never have imagined that my own son was about to destroy his life because of a house that was never mine. I was born in 1952 on a small farm on the outskirts of Port Aransas. My parents were simple people, but with strong character. Dad, as I said, was a fisherman. He would leave before dawn and return with a boat full of fish that Mum would sell at the market. Life was hard, but we never lacked food. I studied at a rural school until the 4th grade. Then I had to walk 4 miles every day to continue my education in town. It was there that I met Richard Coleman, a skinny boy in patched clothes, but smart as they come. We often shared lunch. He helped me with lessons. I defended him from bullies, a friendship that time and money couldn't destroy, at least until my son entered the picture. When I finished school, I got a job at Bank of America. I started as a messenger, then a teller, and with much effort and nights of studying, I was promoted to branch manager. The bank was my second home. I knew each client by name, knew everyone's life story. When someone needed a loan, I analyzed not just the papers but the character of the person. I was rarely wrong. Walter is a man of trust, they used to say. My workday started at 8, but I always arrived at 7. I left at 6, sometimes later. On weekends, I participated in town events representing the bank. It was a life of dedication. It was at the bank that I met my Margaret. She was a teacher and came in to open an account, so beautiful, so educated. I fell in love immediately. It took me 3 months to build up the courage to ask her for coffee. We married a year later in 1979. Our life was simple but happy. We lived in a rented house near downtown, nothing too big, but cozy. In 1980, our Wesley was born. Margaret stopped teaching to take care of him. Those were tight years with just one salary, but we never complained. Speaking of Wesley, he was always an intelligent boy, but impatient. He wanted everything immediately. While other children played, he was already asking how much each toy cost. From an early age, he showed this fixation on money. Margaret said it was just a phase that would pass, but it didn't. When he reached adolescence, he began to complain that we were poor, that his friends had better things. I tried to explain that wealth isn't built overnight, that it required work and patience, words in the wind. I confess we made enormous sacrifices for him. When Wesley wanted to study business administration at the University of Texas in Austin, I sold our only car to pay for his tuition and rent an apartment. We went without a car for 3 years. I went to work by bicycle, in sun and rain. Margaret took the bus to go shopping, carrying heavy bags, all so he could have a better future. During vacations when he came home, he barely thanked us. He thought it was our obligation. In 1995, tragedy struck and changed our lives. Margaret discovered breast cancer already in an advanced stage. We spent all our savings on treatments, trips to MD Anderson in Houston, expensive medications. Wesley was in his final year of college. I asked him to come back, to take a semester off to be with his mother. He refused, said he couldn't waste time. Margaret passed away 6 months later, without seeing her son graduate. At the funeral, Wesley cried, "Of course." But 3 days later he was back in Austin. Life went on for him. It was during this time, in the midst of my grief, that Richard reappeared in my life. He had left Port Aransas when he was young. He went to New York, then to Silicon Valley. He returned a millionaire, owner of a chain of tech stores. He heard about Margaret's death and came to visit me. We talked all night, reminiscing about school days. At the end of the conversation, he made me a proposal that would change my life. "Walter, I have a beach house nearby. I rarely use it. Want to rent it? I'll charge you a symbolic friend's price." The house was in a luxury gated community, facing the ocean. A mansion, to be honest. 5 bedrooms, swimming pool, garden. Richard charged me just $500 a month, when the real value would be around $5,000. "It's a gift for a friend who always helped me," he said. We signed a contract with a clear clause, lifetime and non-transferable use. In plain English, I could live there until I died, but I couldn't sell, rent, or transfer it to anyone. I moved there in 1996. At first, I felt out of place. It was too much space for a widower alone, but gradually that place became my refuge. I retired in 2010 after 37 years at the bank. I started cultivating the garden, doing small repairs, caring for the house as if it were mine. Richard would come visit me now and then, always arriving by helicopter or yacht. We laughed at this difference between us. He, a magnate, me, a simple retired banker. But the friendship remained the same. Wesley visited me rarely. When he did, he was impressed with the house. "How did you manage this, Dad?" he would ask. I explained it was rented, that it belonged to Richard. He listened but seemed not to register, or perhaps he didn't want to register it. In recent years, I noticed changes in his behavior, more frequent calls, questions about the house, about Richard, but I never imagined what was going on in his head. Never imagined my own son could plot something so absurd. Until that Friday arrived, 2 p.m., the phone rang, and nothing would be the same again. That Friday afternoon, I was on the porch watering my orchids. The phone rang and it was Wesley. It had been months since he'd been in touch, so I was even surprised. "Dad, let's travel tomorrow to celebrate," he said with an excitement that didn't match his normally distant manner. "Celebrate what, Wesley?" I asked, finding this sudden excitement strange. "I sold your beach house and the car, $800,000. I've already got the money." Time stopped. I felt a chill in my stomach, a feeling of collapse inside. After a few seconds of silence, I began to laugh. It wasn't a laugh of joy, it was a laugh of desperation, of disbelief. I laughed loudly, almost guffawing. "Why are you laughing, old man?" he asked, irritated by my reaction. "Wesley, you forgot that the house—" I paused before completing, "was never mine." "What do you mean?" His voice came out strangled. "Son, that house has been rented for 30 years. "Liar!" he screamed as if reality could be altered by shouting. "It belongs to Richard Coleman, remember him? We went to school together." But you said it was yours." "No, you assumed it was mine." I heard his heavy breathing on the other end of the line. I felt that I needed to explain better, clarify the situation once and for all, hoping he would understand the gravity of what he had done. "Wesley, Richard and I went to school together from when we were little. He was as poor as I was. God blessed him, and today he has about $200 million, maybe more. The house where I live is his, always was. He rents it to me for $500 a month, a symbolic price, a friend price. The real value would be about $5,000 a month minimum." "You're lying to avoid giving me the money," he yelled. "I have the contract here in the drawer, signed, notarized. One of the clauses clearly states lifetime, non-transferable use." "You know what that means? That only I can live here until the end of my life. I can't transfer, I can't sublease, I can't sell. The house was never mine, Wesley. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I could almost hear his thoughts, trying to find a way out. You never read the contract, never asked, simply assumed the house was mine because you wanted it to be. And now, Dad. His cry interrupted me, full of desperation. I signed as the owner. That phrase dropped like a bomb. My son had not only tried to sell something that didn't belong to us, he had forged documents, had presented himself as the owner. That was a crime, fraud. So you committed wire fraud, Wesley, I said in the calmest voice I could, trying to process the scale of the problem. I received $400,000 as a down payment, he confessed in a trembling voice. You'll have to return it. I already spent it. Paid debts. At that moment, everything fell into place. The sudden visits, the interest in the house, the questions about Richard. My son was in debt and saw in the house an easy way out, a criminal way out. Wesley, do you have any idea what you've done? You forged documents, sold a property that isn't yours, received money for it. This means jail time, son. Help me, Dad, he begged. Talk to your rich friend. Explain that it was a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. You planned this. You came here and took photos of the house. You probably photographed my documents. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's a premeditated crime. He began to cry on the other end. A desperate cry that in other times would have broken my heart. But at that moment, I could only think of the gravity of the situation. Who bought the house, I asked. A businessman from Chicago, Dr. Ernest Meyer. When is he coming? Early tomorrow morning, coming to get the keys and pay the rest. My heart raced. Less than 24 hours to resolve an impossible situation. My son had sold a $5 million house for $800,000 when the house wasn't even ours. He had received $400,000 as a down payment, and the buyer would be coming the next day to complete the deal. Wesley, you need to call this man now. Explain that there was an error, that the house isn't yours to sell. Return the money. I don't have the money anymore, Dad. I already said that. How does someone spend $400,000 in a few weeks? I asked incredulously. I had debts with dangerous people, loans with high interest. If I didn't pay, the truth was beginning to come out. My son wasn't just in debt. He was involved with loan sharks, maybe even worse. I had to sit down, my legs weakened. And what do you expect me to do? Pay for a crime that you committed? You could sell your savings, your investments. I know you have money saved. The audacity left me speechless. After committing a crime, he still wanted me to hand over my life savings to cover his scam. Wesley, I don't have $400,000, not even close. I'm a retired banker, not a millionaire. So, what are we going to do? He asked, as if the problem was ours, not exclusively his. You're going to call this Dr. Ernest and tell him the truth. You're going to take responsibility. Then we'll look for a lawyer and see what can be done. He'll sue me. He'll send me to jail. You should have thought about that before committing the crime, don't you think? I replied, feeling a mixture of disappointment and anger that I had never experienced before. He hung up without saying goodbye. I tried to call back, but the cell phone was already turned off. Knowing Wesley, I knew he wouldn't do what I advised. He was probably thinking of some way to escape, to run from responsibility, as he always did. I spent the night awake, thinking about what to do. By morning, I had made my decision. I called Richard. He was in Europe, but answered promptly. Richard, we have a serious problem. Wesley, he sold your house. What do you mean he sold my house? The voice was of genuine surprise. He posed as the owner, forged documents, received $400,000 as a down payment, and the buyer is coming today to get the keys. The silence on the other end of the line made me anxious. Would our decades-long friendship end like this because of my son's madness? Walter, he finally spoke, you are not to blame for your son's mistakes. I'm returning to the States immediately. I'll arrive in a few hours. Until then, don't give anything to anyone. I hung up feeling an enormous weight. Richard was returning from Europe because of this. His private jet would be landing in Port Aransas in a few hours. Until then, I would have to face this Dr. Ernest. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found myself facing a man of about 50. elegantly dressed, accompanied by a younger woman who I assumed was his wife. "Good morning, I'm Dr. Ernest Meyer. I've come to get the keys to my house." I took a deep breath. This would be one of the most difficult moments of my life. "Dr. Meyer, we need to talk. There's been a serious problem with this sale." The smile on his face immediately disappeared. "What kind of problem?" "My son Wesley sold this house to you, but it isn't ours, never was." "What do you mean?" His shout made even the birds in the garden fly away. "This house belongs to Richard Coleman, a childhood friend who made a fortune. He rents it to me for a symbolic amount for the past 30 years. I have the contract here." I went in to get the contract with Dr. Meyer and his wife following me, visibly upset. I handed him the document, which he read line by line, his face turning increasingly red. This is outrageous. Your son showed me deeds, documents." "Forged," I responded sadly. "He never had the power to sell this house." Dr. Meyer's wife began to cry. They had come from Chicago, probably with many plans for that beach house, and now discovered they had been victims of a scam. "We gave him $400,000. Where is that money?" Dr. Meyer demanded. "He said he's already spent it, had debts." The businessman paced back and forth in the living room, running his hands through his gray hair. Suddenly he grabbed his cell phone. "I'm calling the police. I've been the victim of fraud." I didn't try to stop him. It was the right thing to do. While he was on the phone detailing what had happened to the police, we heard the sound of a car abruptly parking. It was Wesley. He was probably coming to try some last-minute trick. He entered the living room, turning pale when he saw Dr. Meyer on the phone. "What's happening here?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm reporting you to the police for fraud," responded Dr. Meyer, furious. "You sold a house that isn't yours." Wesley looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Dad, you told him. Why did you do this to me?" "Did this to you, Wesley. You sold a house that isn't ours, received $400,000 for it. What did you expect me to do? Participate in the fraud?" He tried to run away, but Dr. Meyer was faster and grabbed him by the arm. At that moment, neighbors began to gather outside. The noise had attracted attention. "Where's my $400,000? shouted Dr. Meyer, holding Wesley by the collar of his shirt. The police didn't take long to arrive. 2 officers entered and asked everyone to calm down. I explained the situation, showed the rental contract, my documents, proof of 30 years of payment. Dr. Meyer showed the purchase documentation signed by Wesley as if he were the owner. "We're going to have to take Mr. Wesley to the station," said one of the officers. "You are being accused of fraud and document forgery." Wesley seemed not to believe it. Maybe he expected that I would intercede, that I would invent some excuse to free him. But how could I? The crime was clear. The evidence was incontestable. As the officers handcuffed my son, we heard the sound of a helicopter approaching. It was Richard arriving. The helicopter landed in the large garden of the house, and from it descended my childhood friend, now a powerful man. "Walter, what a mess is this?" he asked as he entered, looking at the scene. Officers, Wesley handcuffed, Dr. Meyer and wife visibly upset. "My son sold your house," I responded simply. "My $5 million house." The incredulity in his voice was palpable. I quickly explained the situation. Richard listened in silence, his face impassive. When I finished, he approached Wesley. "You sold my property for $800,000, a house that's worth $5 million on the market." Wesley didn't respond, just looked at the floor. "Besides being a criminal, he's stupid," Richard commented, turning to the officers. "I want to file a formal complaint. This man invaded my property, forged documents, and illegally sold it." Dr. Meyer approached Richard, recognizing him. "Mr. Coleman, I'm Ernest Meyer. I was a victim of this scam. I paid $400,000 and was going to pay another $400,000 today." Richard examined him for a moment. "Dr. Meyer, I'm very sorry for what happened. My lawyers will contact you to resolve this situation. As for the criminal," he looked at Wesley, "he will face the consequences of his actions." The police took Wesley away. Dr. Meyer and his wife went with the officers to give a formal statement. I was left alone with Richard in the living room. Walter, I'm so sorry about this. I know how much you must be suffering. I don't recognize my son anymore, Richard. How could he do something like this? Greed does terrible things to people, he responded, putting his hand on my shoulder. But don't worry, you're not to blame. What's going to happen now? I asked, suddenly feeling old and tired. Now I'm going to sue your son criminally and civilly. He invaded my property, forged documents, committed fraud, and Dr. Meyer will probably do the same. Criminal lawsuit, that means prison. Yes, Walter, your son is going to jail. Those words fell like stones upon me. My only son in jail. As wrong as he was, it was a pain that I had never imagined feeling. As for the house, continued Richard, nothing changes for you. It remains your home for as long as you want. Our contract remains valid. I thanked him with a nod of the head, unable to speak. In the weeks that followed, Wesley remained in custody. Bail was set at $100,000, money that he obviously didn't have. He asked me to pay, but I refused. Part of me thought he needed to face the consequences of his actions for the first time in his life. Richard filed criminal charges for trespassing and fraud and a civil lawsuit seeking $10 million in damages. This house has sentimental value, he declared in court. Dr. Meyer also sued Wesley, demanding the return of the $400,000 plus $200,000 in emotional damages. Meanwhile, I visited my son in jail. He had lost weight. His eyes lost their shine. The arrogance was gone, replaced by fear and resentment. Each visit was a torment. He blamed me for not helping him, for not lying to protect him. I blamed myself for not having noticed earlier the wrong path he was taking. The truth is that Wesley never understood the value of honest work, of true friendship. He spent his life looking for shortcuts, easy ways to get what he wanted. And when he finally found what seemed to be the solution to all his problems, a luxurious beach house he could sell, he didn't even bother to check if it was really ours. It was this greed, this haste, this lack of character that led him to prison. And now I had to live with the pain of visiting my only son behind bars, knowing he was there by his own choice, by actions he consciously took, for a crime he planned and executed against a man who had always treated us with kindness. 6 months passed since Wesley's arrest. The trial was scheduled for the following week. I lived between the beach house, which now seemed too big, too empty, and the jail for weekly visits. Richard maintained his position. He would go all the way with the lawsuits. Dr. Meyer, too. On a Wednesday, I received an unexpected call. It was Mary Catherine, Wesley's ex-wife. They had divorced 5 years ago after a brief and turbulent marriage. Mr. Walter, this is Mary. I heard about Wesley, about what he did. Yes, Mary, a sad situation. I need to talk to you. I have something important to show you. Can I come over? A few hours later, Mary arrived at the house. She brought with her a folder and a serious expression. We sat on the porch facing the sea. Mr. Walter, when Wesley and I separated, I accidentally took some of his documents. I never gave it much importance until I heard about what happened. She opened the folder and showed me the contents. Bank statements, printed emails, contracts. Wesley had a scheme. He borrowed money from people, promising investments with high returns, but he didn't invest. He used money from new clients to pay the old ones, a Ponzi scheme. I examined the documents in astonishment. It was a sophisticated scheme involving dozens of people. Some names were known in Port Aransas. When the scheme began to collapse, he became desperate. He needed money quickly, a lot of money. That's when he decided to sell the house. The pieces finally fit together, I completed. Exactly, but there's more. Look at this. Mary showed me a printed email. It was a conversation between Wesley and a man named Carl. I need to sell my father's beach house. How much do you charge to forge the documents? Said Wesley's message. 10% of the value, responded Carl. Deal. The house is worth about $5 million, but I'll sell it for $800,000 to be quick. I'll pay you $80,000 when I close the deal. The messages continued, detailing how they would forge deeds, certificates, everything necessary to make it appear that the house was Wesley's property, not Richard's. This proves it was premeditated, I said, feeling my stomach sink. He knew exactly what he was doing. There's more, said Mary. pulling a flash drive from her purse. Recordings. Wesley confessing the whole scheme to a friend, boasting about how he would trick the buyer, how he would flee the country afterward. "Why are you showing me this, Mary?" I asked, confused. "You split up years ago. Why do you care?" She took a deep breath, her eyes watering. "Because it's the right thing to do, because Wesley deceived a lot of people, including me, and because you don't deserve to suffer for it. You were always good to me, even after the divorce." At that moment, I understood I had an unexpected ally. Mary not only brought evidence that would incriminate Wesley even more, but also showed that the problem was much bigger than I had imagined. My son hadn't just sold the house out of financial desperation. It was part of a larger scheme, a life built on lies and frauds. "What do you intend to do with this?" I asked. "Give it to the police and to the victims' lawyers, but I wanted to show you first. You deserve to know the truth." I thanked Mary. She left, leaving me copies of everything. I spent the night reflecting on what to do. The next morning I made a decision. I called Richard and told him about the discoveries. He listened in silence. "Walter, this only makes your son's situation worse. With this evidence, he could get many years in prison." "I know, but the truth needs to come out. He needs to face the consequences." "What do you intend to do?" "I'm going to give everything to the prosecutor in the case, and I want to testify against Wesley at the trial." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "Are you sure? He's your son." "Precisely because he's my son, I need to do what's right. I can't protect him from this." Richard agreed. The next day I sought out the district attorney and handed over all the evidence. He was impressed with the amount of evidence. "This changes everything," he said. "With these proofs, your son could get up to 10 years in prison." On the day of the hearing, the courthouse was packed. Port Aransas is a small town, and the case had become the talk of the moment. When I was called to testify, I felt all eyes on me. Wesley, seated next to his public defender, stared at me with a mixture of plea and anger. "Mr. Walter Newman, do you confirm that your son, Wesley Newman, sold a property that didn't belong to him?" asked the prosecutor. "I confirm," I responded in a firm voice. "And are you aware that your son knew the property wasn't his to sell?" "Yes, he knew the house belonged to Richard Coleman, and that I only rented it." "Could you explain to the court how you came to this conclusion?" I then related the whole story. How Wesley grew up visiting that house, how he always knew it was rented, how he never showed interest in the details until he realized he could profit from it. I presented the evidence brought by Mary, the emails, the fake contracts, the recordings. Wesley's face transformed as I spoke, from initial plea to pure hatred. When I finished my testimony, he shouted from the defense table, "Traitor! My own father betraying me!" The judge called for silence. Wesley was restrained by the guards. The trial continued with other testimonies, including those of Mary, Dr. Meyer, and Richard. At the end of the day, the judge announced his decision. "Wesley Newman, this court finds you guilty of fraud, document forgery, racketeering, and other related crimes. The sentence is 8 years in prison in a maximum security facility, plus the payment of indemnification in the amount of $10.6 million to the victims." The gavel fell, sealing my son's fate. I saw when the officers took him away. He didn't look at me. I knew that in his mind I was guilty of his conviction, not his own actions. I left the courthouse exhausted, but with a clear conscience. I had done what was right, no matter how painful. Richard was waiting for me outside. "You were brave, Walter. Few fathers would have the strength to do what you did." "I don't feel brave. I feel defeated. The defeat would be to protect a criminal, even if he's your son. You chose justice. That's victory." In the weeks that followed, other victims of Wesley's scheme appeared. The number reached dozens. People who had invested their savings, trusting in his promises. Some lost everything. The total amount diverted came to millions. A month after the trial, I decided to visit Wesley in prison. He initially refused to see me, but ended up accepting. I found a bitter man, consumed by hatred. "Come to see the result of your work, Dad?" was the first thing he said. "I've come to see my son. He's still my son, despite everything." "I'm not your son anymore. A father doesn't do what you did. And what did I do, Wesley? I told the truth. I did what was right. You betrayed me. You turned me in. You could have helped me. You could have lied for me. And become an accomplice to your crimes, deceive my childhood friend, participate in a scam against dozens of innocent people. He didn't answer, just looked away. Wesley, I'm going to leave here owing millions, he finally said, his voice almost a whisper. Your problem, I responded, feeling each word like a stab in my own chest. You created this problem. You're going to have to deal with it. I'll be homeless when I get out of here. Everything I had was confiscated. The beach house has a guest room you never noticed. He looked at me without understanding. What does that mean? That if you had been honest, hard-working, if you had followed a straight path in life, you would always have had a place to stay. That house had space for you, but you preferred to try to steal it. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then I took courage to reveal what hurt me the most. Wesley, want to know the worst? What? He asked without real interest. Richard was going to donate the house to me. What? His eyes widened, finally showing some emotion beyond anger. On my 75th birthday, 2 years away, he said this in court. You didn't hear it? No, it can't be true. He was going to transfer the house to my name as a gift for 50 years of friendship. A $5 million house that would be legally mine and that one day would be yours as an inheritance. Wesley turned pale, the reality of what he had lost finally hitting him. But after your stupidity, he cancelled, said he's not going to donate anymore. He'll continue renting to me for the same amount, but the property will remain his. Wesley punched the wall, injuring his hand. I saw the blood running, but he didn't even seem to notice, consumed by anger and regret. You didn't lose $800,000, Wesley. You lost $5 million, and worse, you lost your freedom, your dignity, your future. I got up to leave. He didn't say anything more, just sat there looking at his bleeding hand, at the prison uniform, at the empty future awaiting him. I'll continue visiting you, I said before leaving. You're still my son, but don't expect me to feel sorry for you. You chose this path. I left the prison feeling the weight of the years. I had done what was right, but the price had been too high. I lost my son to greed, to the rush to have without earning, to the illusion of easy money. On the way home, I stopped at the beach and looked at the sea. The waves continued their eternal movement, indifferent to human dramas. I thought of Margaret, how devastated she would have been by all this. Perhaps it was better that she wasn't here to see. Justice had been done, but it brought no joy, just the bitter satisfaction of knowing that the lies had come to light, that the victims would have some reparation, that the truth, however painful, had prevailed. 4 years have passed since that trial. Time, as always, followed its relentless course, modifying people and situations. Wesley served part of his sentence and managed to progress to a minimum security facility due to his behavior in prison. Not out of true remorse, I suspect, but out of calculation. He was always good at that, calculating what would bring him advantages. In the first visits, after his transfer to the minimum security facility, I noticed that he had aged a lot. His once black hair was now sprinkled with white. Deep wrinkles marked his face. The youthful arrogance gave way to a permanent bitterness. Physically, he seemed to be 60, not the 49 he actually was. Richard bought all my debts, he told me in one of those visits. Now I owe everything to him. It was true, Richard, with his business acumen, had legally acquired all the credit rights against Wesley. He bought the debts from all the creditors, including the reimbursement to Dr. Meyer and the victims of the Ponzi scheme. Now Wesley owed exclusively to Richard, and the debt grew with interest. I owe $18 million today, he said, his gaze lost. I'll never be able to pay it. Maybe that's not his objective, I replied. Maybe he just wants to ensure you never forget what you did. With time, Wesley obtained parole. He left prison, but had nowhere to go. His house had been auctioned to pay part of the debts, his assets confiscated, his bank accounts blocked. I offered help, the minimum, a temporary roof, but he refused. Wounded pride spoke louder. He went to live on the streets of Austin. From time to time he would appear in Port Aransas, always disheveled, Unshaven, dirty clothes, coming to ask for money, some change for food. I would give enough for a meal, never more than that. Buy some bread, some coffee, I would say, handing over $10 or $20. He would take the money, his eyes always moist, always red. Sometimes he would start crying right there in front of me. Dad, I could have been a millionaire. The house could have been mine. It could have, but you chose to be a thief. Hard words, I know. But what else could I say? Lie? Say it's okay, that he just made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious choice. It was betrayal. It was greed. In one of these visits, about 6 months ago, he asked me something he had never asked before. Dad, do you forgive me? I looked at that man before me, my son, flesh of my flesh, the boy I had cradled in my arms, that I had taught to walk, to talk, to read, for whom I had worked so much, sacrificed so much. Now a broken man, destroyed by his own choices. No, I responded in a firm voice. Why? He asked, genuinely surprised. Perhaps he expected that time would have softened my position. Because you didn't make a mistake. You chose to betray me. It was easy money, he tried to justify, as if that explained everything. Was prison also easy? I retorted. He didn't respond, just looked away. Wesley, you sold a house that you had visited for 30 years and never asked who it belonged to. I thought it was yours. No, you wanted to think it was. Greed blinds, son, and you're still blind to this day. That was our last meaningful conversation. He still appears from time to time, takes some change, and leaves. We don't talk anymore. We don't try explanations or justifications anymore. What could be said has been said. In Port Aransas, the story became a legend. People still comment, still point when he passes by. It's the son who sold a rental house, they say. It became a joke, a synonym for stupidity and greed, a living lesson for the young people of the town. Meanwhile, my life went on. Richard kept his word. I continue living in the house, paying the symbolic rent. Sometimes he comes to visit me, and we talk about the old times, about school, about the friends we've lost, about life. We never talk about Wesley in these moments. It's a wound that we prefer not to touch. I've made new friends in the gated community. I participate in a fishing group on Sundays. I teach math to underprivileged children twice a week at the community center. I keep my mind occupied, my heart at peace, as much as possible. Life has taught me hard, but valuable lessons. I learned that character is the only true inheritance we can leave. Money, properties, material goods, all this is transitory. It can be lost in the blink of an eye. But character, honesty, the given word, this remains and flows through generations. I also learned that we cannot control the choices of others, even those we love the most. Wesley had the same opportunities I did, the same examples, the same education. He chose a different path, his choice, his responsibility. Today, at 77 years old, I look back and see a life of honest work, of true friendships, of principles maintained even in the most difficult hours. The wrinkles on my face are from smiles and legitimate concerns, not from regrets. The calloused hands carry the weight of dignified work, not of scams and tricks. Wesley is 49 years old but looks 70. I am 77, but they tell me I look 60. A clean conscience rejuvenates, guilt ages. Sometimes I look at the sea from the porch of this house that was never mine and think about what could have been. If Wesley had been patient, honest, hard-working, if he had valued family ties above quick money, if he had understood that true wealth is not in possessing things, but in being the owner of oneself, of one's word, of one's character. He sold a house that never existed, at least not as our property, and I lost a son that I now realize I never really had. The boy I raised, for whom I dreamed a dignified future, died the moment he decided that betrayal and lies were worth more than honesty and respect. It's not a happy story, I know, but it's a true story. And perhaps its deepest truth is this, that our choices define who we are much more than our circumstances or opportunities. Wesley chose to be who he is, and now lives with the consequences of these choices. As for me, I choose to live my last years in peace. Grateful for the true friends I have, for the good memories I keep, for the respect I've built throughout a life. I don't have millions in the bank, I don't have luxury cars, I don't have a beachfront mansion in my name, but I have something much more valuable. I can look into the eyes of any person in this town without lowering my head, without feeling shame. I can sleep peacefully every night, knowing that I never betrayed anyone's trust, never sold what didn't belong to me. If you've made it this far, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's not easy to listen to sad stories like this one, but if something from this account stayed with you, perhaps it's this: that honesty never goes out of style, that character is worth more than any fortune, that peace of mind is priceless. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. And if you really stayed with me to the end of this journey, comment below the word deed. Only those who watched will understand the meaning. I thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for this opportunity to share my story. I hope it serves as a warning for parents and children, for young people in a hurry to get rich, for those who think shortcuts are the way. A loving embrace from this old man here, who learned in the hardest way that the most valuable house is not the one in our name, but the one we build with honesty, day after day, brick by brick, inside our heart.